Not a download. Or just a minute.
I sent two options.
Okay, well, let me see if the other one works. Let's see here. Share.
One was a PDF and one was.
They both say I have to sign in. I suppose you could sign in if you're comfortable with that.
I've just never seen that before, but I could.
Or you can
Oh,
send
you
it
know
as
what
a
I
PDF.
You know what I didn't do is I gave them.
Oh, yeah, if you can let me share some of that screen. It won't ask, you have to change it in the, Mackenzie. Actually. Sure, for on share, okay, so go back to the other option where it is, see if it might be. You can share it. You wanna do it? Oh, no, that's for you, share. Can you make me? Yes. All right. We're good.
All right, hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for your patience with our technical difficulties. I hope everybody got a minute to get something to eat. So what we're doing tonight here is, we're gonna talk about, actually, I'm gonna move this over so I'm not walking in front of the camera. So tonight we're gonna talk about the river, as we have been for several months in several different ways. I think some of you maybe came to our talk where we had some Tim Gustafson talking about infrastructure along rivers and along waterways around Chicago. And we've also had a talk with Urban Rivers where they talked about the work they're doing with plants and animals and the floating islands out by the confluence of Bubbly Creek in the South Branch. And so tonight we have guests from the Aquarium. We're going to kind of continue with this theme and talk about restoration work and what that means for plants and animals and communities on the river, including all of us. So really looking forward to that. And we're gonna get started with a couple of announcements and then turn it over to them. That's the screen. I think the other one is. No, sorry, I actually don't remember. It might be in the back. Can everybody see okay? Yeah. All right. So a couple things. So welcome and snacks. I think we've got that part. So the South Branch Connectivity Project. So that's it. Some of you came to several of our events the last couple of months talking about work on the riverfront, about that, and our guest speakers, and also want to talk about some board and volunteer opportunities. So first off, thanks to everybody who came out. Thanks for everybody who came out for our events concerning the idea of building our connected path along the riverfront. We're really excited about it. We had about 600 neighbors who showed up to participate in a variety of events in Henley Park and Bridgeport and Chinatown. So super excited about that. And we're actively crunching all of that right now so that we can, get back to you with some more concrete ideas. We're going to publish our report in June. And we are starting to have conversations with city, state, grant funders, et cetera, about funding to make some of this happen. So it's still going to be like one lot at a time because we literally have to go to every property owner on the riverfront and say, hey, will you help us do this and do your little piece of it? So this is not going to be an overnight thing, but it's, we're getting there one piece at a time. And then, another thing we want to ask you to put your comments in regarding the that's next, sorry. It's being really weird because it zooms on. We also want to ask you to submit comments on the Western Bridge. For those of you who went to the public open house about the bridge, thank you. If this is the first time you've heard about it, I want to let you know that there's still time to make comments about it. So the good news is they're redoing the Western Bridge, which is so far overdue. You can literally see those potholes from space. And if you don't believe me, go look at Google Street View. The bad news is they're only doing the bridge. They're literally doing the bridge from here to here. And of course, there's a lot more work that needs done besides that. And so there really hasn't been given much thought about like people trying to cross Western or go under Western or go around it. Yeah.
Just a quick question. Is CDOT doing the bridge? Okay, CDOT, okay.
Yeah, CDOT's doing the bridge. So basically this is their plan. You can see all of this on the 12th Ward website. On the 12th Ward website, there's also a link where you can send comments. And I tried to copy it, but it's like a mile long and it goes to a Google form controlled by CDOT. So rather than try and give you all the gobbledygook, I'll ask you to go to the 12th Ward website and let people know what you think about this. Cause it's like, the good news is they're doing something. The bad news is it's not everything we need. Please.
Can I just mention, I don't know if anybody else go to that meeting?
Mackenzie was there.
Guys, the
the bridge people in CDOT don't talk to the bike and pedestrian people, the complete streets people. So any comments, if you want to just type something like that with those words, that would be helpful, because the bike and pedestrian access people that work on beautiful bike maps in the city and connecting, they are not consulted at all to work with the bridge people, because the bridge people have their billions, billions of dollars. They will fix it. We are happy they're gonna fix it, the polls, but they've got to talk to each other. And if you ever care about, you thought in the future, maybe I could ride a bike over that. Maybe I would walk over there by the boat ramp, or, or on our beautiful lakefront trail or riverfront trail that is stops at the bridge.
Yeah. No, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, because you actually can't cross, there's really no safe crossing on Western between 35th and Blue Island, which is more or less 26. It's a whole 10 blocks where like you really can't cross the street. And when Eladio and I did the existing conditions pictures for our bike path, we tried, right? And we literally picked up our bikes and ran across 10 lanes and three sections of Western with built-up medians. It's awful. So we do need CDOT to look at that. So anyway, please write in, let them say thank you, and we appreciate your help. All right, so then after that, the next thing I want to bring out too, and I'll talk about this again at the end, but MPDC is recruiting. We need new volunteers, we need board members, and we want to talk to you. So here are some of the things that board members and volunteers can do, and they are different levels of commitment, and they do have different requirements. So anybody who's familiar with McKinley Park and likes what we do is welcome to volunteer with us. Volunteers typically help with a defined function, like, hey, we're having an event and we need somebody to help set up tables and chairs and clean up afterwards. So that's the kind of thing that we would ask from a lot of volunteers. No experience required. Show up, we'll give you instructions. We'll be happy to see you. If we're able to, we'll feed you. That's kind of how this works. Board members is a larger commitment. We have an annual cycle, which is happening now, to bring on new board members. The requirements are that you must live, work, study, or recreate in McKinley Park. So in other words, you have to spend a significant amount of time here and demonstrate that in the way that you act on behalf of the neighborhood. Relevant experience is required but not desired. If you ran for student council in high school, like that's something, that's relevant experience, okay? If you have worked with other small organizations, or other organizations in the community, that's relevant experience. So it's not a high bar, we just want people to come with a little bit of a skill set. Typical commitment is a couple of hours a week. We have these public meetings and other public events that we put on, we ask board members to help with, and we have a monthly board meeting that is required. So if you're interested in that, if you like what we're doing, we invite you to come see us at Mars 2 weeks from today. So Mars, May 1st at 6:30, we're going to have a meet and greet for anyone who's interested in joining the bar, and we'll have a couple of beers or fancy seltzer or whatever your jam is, and maybe some tacos, and talk about all the things we love about McKinley Park and what we can do about that. And so in regards to that, these are some specific needs that we have in the near future. And so if you're interested in these specific things, we would also like to talk to you. Things that anybody can do. We're going to be hosting more riverfront events, especially there's going to be a festival on the water this summer. And as you might have noticed, a lot of people have come to our events and been like, man, I didn't know this park was even here. That means that we invite communities into our neighborhood to come to a festival in those parks. We have to help them get there. And so we're going to need assistance with things like that. For example, perhaps to meet a group at the Ashland L Station and walk to Canal Port River Walk because it's hard to find. So that's the needs that we're going to have for events coming up this summer. Also some promotion for those events, and that might be help with social media or flyering, and then setting up and tearing down like basic tables, chairs, that kind of thing. Some special skills that we are looking for. We are looking for anybody who has experience with tax planning and website design. Are some needs of the organization right now that we're looking for some a little extra. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to our guest speakers. So we have these fabulous people with us. Jacqueline and Austin from the shed, you're gonna tell you about my building.
Best place to stand is here-ish.
Ish.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Cool. We are honored to be here. Thanks for having us. We'll start briefly with introductions and then I'm gonna share a few slides. Austin will share a few slides. And we hopefully have lots of time for Q&A and to hear a little bit from you all. But so I am the Senior Director of Conservation Action. I oversee a team of folks at the aquarium who run volunteer events like beach cleanups, planting days, at sites throughout the Chicago area and the forest preserves as well. And we have continued to kind of expand a lot of our habitat restoration work on the Chicago River. So I'll share a little bit about kind of the history of that today, but that's a little bit of the context here. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Austin Happel. Can you introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Austin Campbell. I run a research program at Aquarium, trying to understand sort of the history of the Chicago River, how it's gotten to where we are now, and how have fish decided to survive there, but then also kind of try to understand how they respond to the ecosystem as it is now. Kind of hard to place these restoration actions in the context or like understand their benefits without understanding that long-term history and context. So that's the realm I'm in.
Cool. And this is our agenda of it today. So introduction, just what we just did. We'll talk a little bit about the history of Bubbly Creek and the south branch of the river. I know just a bit. We did get to tour the Racine Avenue pumping station today, which I learned a lot about. It was fascinating. So kind of always learning more. I'm sure you all know a lot, bits of the history as we're all piecing things together. We'll talk a little bit about, Shed's work on the Chicago River. And then that's when I'll pass it off to Austin to share a research update, and then we'll do Q&A. So that's kind of the plan for today. Relax. Thank you for your help. Okay, so a little refresh, and you're likely familiar. I liked this photo or this map that Austin found recently, kind of showing, the south branch of the river along kind of the top of this image and Bubbly Creek, and kind of really what Bubbly Creek used to look like. And just some interesting, bullets about the history of this area. That the original creek drained a wetland. Like Chicago really was a swampy, kind of seasonally flooding area. But these days our rivers have largely been channelized, which is, what can cause a lot of flooding. And it also is not great habitat or, access for people to get along the river. So it's kind of helpful to understand some of these pieces of the history to kind of understand where we are today. So after it was draining a wetland, as it's kind of becoming more developed in this area, then the Bubbly Creek was really used for draining the stockyards. And so industry and packing plants were just dumping junk into Bubbly Creek. A lot of you are probably familiar with this. That's why it's called Bubbly Creek, because the organic waste that was kind of falling to the bottom of the river was bubbling up as it rotted. And in the 1800s, early 1900s is when it was especially terrible. Since the Clean Water Act passed in 1972, that's really helped with continued improvement over time. But as we know, there's still a lot of legacy pollution. I'm kind of getting off a little bit. So also kind of looking back, thinking of, for several decades, the effluent was actually bleached before being dumped into the river. So that's not a healthy chemical to have in our waterways. And then it was filled into Ashland in the 30s and to Pershing in the 40s. So it kind of, does not look the way it does these days. So this whole east branch of the south branch of it was the South Fork, whatever it's called, has now been filled in. So now Bubbly Creek is a little over a mile long and ends at the Racine Avenue pumping station. And it's got kind of, definitely an abridged version of what we have. And again, the pumping station was built in 1939. So these days, I again kind of have some stats kind of top of mind from the tour today. The Racine Avenue pumping station only is live a couple times a year. And if you're familiar with combined sewer overflows, that's when we have huge rain events that cause these pumping stations to have to pump sewage into the river. And sometimes it's also pumped into Lake Michigan. So we'll have things like beach closures, and we need to make sure that, our drinking water isn't impacted and things like that. So all of these things are kind of connected, and just kind of wanted to share this little bit of the history of Bubbly Creek and the South Branch as well, that has really been largely channelized and just really doesn't have its natural flow and ability to flood the way it once did. So if you go to the next slide, I want to share a little bit about that is long history, and there's definitely been a lot of pollution even today, it's better, but there's still a lot of pollution. We still have combined sewer overflows. But I did want to just kind of share a little bit about well, why does Shed care? And a couple of years ago, we launched a new strategic plan leading up to our centennial. We turn 100 in 2030. And this was an opportunity to launch a strategic plan that seeks to benefit our broader Chicago community with these kind of just, three buckets, three kind of big priorities in mind for people, for communities, and for aquatic life. So Shed is making a $500 million investment, both in our offsite work and in updating or kind of giving a facelift to a lot of the aquarium itself. So if anybody has been at the aquarium in the last year or so, you may have noticed that we're under construction, or you may have heard about some of this in the news. And this is all part of our centennial commitment to improve the aquarium experience, but then expand our investment into Chicago waterways and into Chicago communities. So I bring that up because we've been doing work on the river for a while. And I think if you jump to the next slide, I'll share a little bit of the history in a second. But it was kind of just a reinvestment and it giving us a chance to continue to expand Shed's work. When we think about our work on the river, we have these three goals that I think are really well aligned with a lot of you all and with the McKinley Park Development Council. We're working with partner organizations and community residents to reimagine, research, and rewild the Chicago River. We want to expand learning opportunities and recreational access, improve river health and support biodiversity and climate resiliency, and collect data and monitoring river ecology to help inform our efforts and to connect people to science and let us geek out about all the things that we're able to learn about the river as well. So these are kind of our high level goals of what we're doing out here. Just a bit of a snapshot of our history of our work on the river. We started in 2018 with working on the North Branch. We forged a partnership with Urban Rivers, who many of you got to hear from recently at one of your meetings. And we helped to sponsor some of the floating wetland installation up on the Wild Mile. And I'll kind of point out, Wild Mile is on the east side of Goose Island right up here. It's, again, a very channelized part of the river, but it's kind of protected from big boat traffic. So it's been a really cool place to do floating wetland installations. Austin has been doing larval fish sampling to get to see what kind of baby fish are living up there around the Wild Mile and which types of fish and how many are kind of living underwater under these floating wetlands. And we also launched a Kayak for Conservation program. It's a pay what you can public program. And if you're interested in more information, you can check that out on our website at shedaquarium.org/kayak. If you just want to learn more and see, I think we are launching registration in the next few weeks. So look out for that this coming summer. So that program is, about getting people out on the river to kind of learn about the history of the river and also to learn about what can we envision for a future of the river. Why floating wetlands? If you heard Urban Rivers talk, you probably heard them talk about how, the state of our river is what it is today. There are some restrictions to us totally rewilding and taking out seawalls and just turning it into what it once was, because it can't just be what it once was. So things like floating wetlands are a cool tactic for adding habitat and kind of, piecemeal and especially where it's most needed if there are gaps in aquatic spaces. And then since 2022, we started work on the South Branch, taking a lot of what we learned on the North Branch and kind of replicating some pieces of it, but also really, learning as we went about what's unique about the South Branch. Austin will talk a bit about how he has expanded his monitoring and has been learning that there is even more diversity in the South Branch than the North Branch. So it's just been really interesting as the aquarium to kind of say, a lot of things are living here. Why? And how can we continue to support them? And how can we connect people to this really cool space that has a lot of value for getting out to paddle, getting out to go birding, and also just enjoying the green spaces that's available, but also expanding the green space and making more of that. So I've kind of a bit of a snapshot of what we've been doing to date. And I think I just have maybe one or two more slides here. I do want to share what this looks like in a little bit more detail. And these are all things that are still to come, either this year or the next year. And these are also things I want to say that, you know, as we are coming up with like restoration strategies that we think will be helpful for improving river health, we're really hoping to have a lot of, you know, community input and connect people to what we're doing. And so this is really hopefully like kind of an iterative and collaborative process as we experiment with some of these strategies. But so one of the first things that we've already been doing with the Chicago Park District is terrestrial restoration. So that means on land at 3 of the parks near the confluence of Bubbly Creek and the South Branch. So at Park 571 on the far right, which many of you are probably familiar with, a cool new boathouse. Canal Origins is directly across Bubbly Creek, and then Canal Origins is on the left side. And I'm just thinking about the connectivity plan in this area. You can see and throw a rock at Canal Origin, but you can't get there other than going all the way down around the highway and back up Ashland. And so, I mean, while we're trying to find ways to connect the aquatic habitat, we also need to connect the human habitat. So some good things that we're kind of generating, you know, building this collaboration with the park district to convert some of the turf grass at Park 571 to natural space, and then improving and bolstering some parts of the other 2 parks. Floating wetlands have already gone in. If you see the white area just on the south side of Canal Origins, we've installed 6 little islands. So they were installed in 2022. Has anybody seen them by chance? Okay, cool. I should be asking more questions. You guys are experiencing this stuff like in real time. So they went in 2022, year 1. If you saw them year 1, they may look kind of skimpy, but that's, you know, pretty common. Small plug plants usually need a couple of years to establish because these are native plants. They a lot of them are wetland plants, some prairie plants, things that aren't. I think we had around 50 native species on the 6 islands, so a huge diversity beyond what you would usually find in a lot of our natural areas. And we're trying to concentrate biodiversity on these. So they grow up and can attract birds and pollinators and kind of pretty for us to explore. And then they grow deep down into the water and create a lot of hiding places and food and things like that for wildlife under the wetlands. And since we can't really see that stuff easily, that's why we have Austin. It's like, what's going on the plot? So barge slip debris removal is another one of our kind of a la carte tactics here. So the 3 prongs kind of coming off of the South Branch are these really interesting areas. For the most part, they're not really used by industry anymore, but they had once been dredged and emptied out so that barges could go into the slips, have materials dumped or removed from the barge, and then they would pull back out and continue on their way, like wherever they were heading, either out to the Great Lakes or down in the Mississippi. But they're largely not used anymore. And Austin is finding that there's a lot of like wildlife refuge in there. So a lot of wildlife is going back in those barge slips to hang and hide out, find food, rest. But we also know that there's a lot of debris, including sunken boats and docks and things that are kind of abandoned and just sort of perpetuate this sense that the river's a dumping ground and that don't really serve wildlife that well. So we're looking to remove that stuff and replace it with some submerged plants and woody debris that are better natural materials for them. And then lastly, litter catchment devices, another sexy term, another, you know, fun tactic for us, but this is really an exciting thing because litter does end up in our waterways. It blows out of our garbage cans or it's dumped, and it is really kind of like a magnet to water and ends up in our waterways. And from there, it breaks down, becomes microplastics, can be eaten by wildlife, can end up in our drinking water. And so we're going to be piloting the installation of a couple litter booms near Canal Origins Park that will kind of passively collect litter and then can be collected and removed. There's one other pilot project like this that was installed by Friends of the Chicago River on the main branch. It's called the C-bin. So there are all sorts of different technologies, and we just want to start with something low key that we can just sort of see given some of the weird water flow, like where is litter coming from? Does that even come up from Bubbly Creek during combined sewer overflows? Is it coming from the South Branch? And we can kind of test that out and see how things are being collected. We'll be partnering with a scientist from Loyola University named Tim Bowline, who's done a lot of regional Great Lakes research on litter and kind of where it's coming from. And hopefully that'll help inform some future efforts to just clean up this area, so we're not seeing so much trash in the water. I think if you go to the next slide, I have some pictures of some of this stuff to see, and I think this is maybe my last slide. So it's an image of Park 571, some of the young plants that were planted last year to create a pollinator garden. I think this is kind of between like the boathouse and the field house. So hopefully this year we'll see those guys bigger and better, and we're working with the park district to kind of fill in and make sure that these spaces are really healthy this year. This is a picture I just took a couple weeks ago at Park 571. So especially over winter, trash is really collecting. So just trying to see, yes, we have things like Chicago River Day, which is a huge volunteer event in May. If you're interested in checking that out, it's hosted by Friends of the Chicago River. But we also just need more volunteer work and these litter catchment devices. And then this is an example of one of the sunken boats. There's actually maybe 2 sunken boats there.
That's in front of CDOT, right?
This isn't one of the barge slips. Is it? Yeah, you are probably more familiar.
To the slips, are they part of the public waterway or do they belong to the businesses that are around the
Water,
slips?
the water, I believe is, and yeah, maybe you would have more to say too. I mean, it's a little bit confusing. The water we think is part of public waterway, although if you do any work, you have to get permits to install or any changes.
And
Yeah.
everybody is responsible for the water. and
Yeah.
Army Corps is responsible. Oh, crap, I don't remember.
Army Corps is responsible for like navigation.
Yeah,
everything that
responsible for navigation, but then as far as like the land bottom, I don't remember it.
It belongs to the lots, because if you see the plot for the Damon silos, like literally a quarter of their lot is underwater.
Yeah, cause like there's the water ownership, there's land bottom ownership, and then there's riparian, so it's a couple of things. It's weird.
We're figuring out with the barge slips though, because we haven't done any work back there. And so
It's actually, we can talk about this offline,
Yeah.
but one of the things I need to do is talk to the Coast Guard, who apparently controls certain other things on waterways that are not navigable. So
Okay.
maybe we could tag team.
That sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. There are lots of players, so it's good to know who approves certain things. I know, and you may have heard this from Urban Rivers, their permitting process is landowner, Army Corps, CDOT, and Department of Natural Resources. And so, but I don't know if that is also kind of some of the same play. I'm sure some of the same players, but we've got a lot to figure out. I keep saying this is my last slide, but I have other pictures. This is a picture of a couple of years ago, our floating wetland installation. You can click one more.
Wait, so that's what's under them?
Yeah, exactly. So these are the modules that are connected kind of piecemeal there. I like to think of them as Legos because you can take them and put them into any kind of configuration, and Urban Rivers is wonderful at kind of engineering them and deciding, what do we want to pilot? Do we want to test out like a little mussel bed, or do we want to put some submerged plants in one of these things, try out some trees? And then this was our installation from Park 571 a couple of years ago. But we are going to be doing another installation somewhere during 2025, and that would be something that could be cool to talk with folks here about, you know, what are you liking or seeing about the current floating wetlands? Where would you like to see them? And we'll work with Urban Rivers to find out what's allowable given permits, given engineering, maybe given, you know, wildlife or ecological data, and just kind of thinking about where we would like to see those. So this is a little bit of a flashback, but also the nod of we're going to be doing another installation next year. So I'm happy to take questions at the end because we'll just kind of open things up. I'll pass it over to Austin to share a few slides, and then yeah, we'll jump into discussion after that.
Yeah, cool. So as you saw, we've been doing some restoration throughout the Chicago River, both in the North Branch and in the South Branch. Those are also easy for me to get to as a researcher to collect samples. So a lot of my sampling has been done comparing those two branches. If we go to the next slide, I started at Shed in 2019. Quickly found out that there's a bunch of organizations that are already collecting data on the river, but one thing that was sort of missing was understanding of where fish are and are not spawning and how that might inform what fish communities are where. And this is something that I could easily run as a kind of a lab, a research lab of one. I would go to different locations in the river and put out these glowing traps. The glowing part was a glow stick, and little baby fish are attracted to that, similar to bugs are attracted to light. And then they swim into the trap, and then I can pull the trap up an hour later and kind of see what we caught. We did this at 5 sites in the North Branch and 5 sites in the South Branch for 3 different summers. So I spent 18 weeks at night out in the river each summer. And some of the results that I wanted to share to you are just the large scale comparisons between what we find in the North versus the South Branch. You guys are familiar with what the South Branch looks like. It's rather industrialized, very much steel walls, not a whole lot of overhanging vegetation. The opposite occurs in the North Branch, so a lot of people like to kayak up there, and it's very peaceful. But what I'm finding biodiversity wise is that's the opposite of the case. We find a lot more species, so just the number of bars on this graph is the different species in the South Branch, and then we find more of them. So the larger the bar means the more of those individual species I found. And then without going into detail of what each species is, the larger bars that are over here in the North Branch are species that can tolerate almost anything. So we've heard of like a goldfish and like a bowl at home. Our version of that is a common carp. They seem to be everywhere in the North Branch. We find much smaller amounts of them in the South Branch. Some other species around goby invaded from the Great Lakes, but they can survive in anything. So we find them in the North Branch. Conversely, South Branch, we find things that are super interesting and things we'd like more of in the river. So it's neat to see them around here. So my question was why? What are they finding in this area and what did they like? And you had a question?
Could you explain tolerant and intolerant?
Tolerant species are species that could survive in almost any sort of condition. So when I was talking about the common carp being able to survive in anything, they're able to gulp air so they can get oxygen from just the air. They don't really have too much concerns with what is in the water. So contaminants or pollution, they can tend to do fine with. The opposite would be something that's intolerant. They need like a lot of oxygen in the water. They like to have vegetation nearby. They are very specific about what food they look for. So it's kind of cool to see some of these species that we would consider intolerant to be found in the South Branch.
It is, but it just seems so.
To us,
The other way around.
right? Like visually, when you're looking from the surface, you're like, nothing lives in here. But then to look into it and find the opposite, I think is super cool and fun to talk about. And then now my question is, well, like, why? What do fish find in the South Branch? If you go to the next one, we're exploring getting an answer to that question by having the fish tell us what habitats they like. We're using a technique called acoustic telemetry. So on the left, it's showing an image of a fish with a tag in it. Acoustic means that it makes sound. So we put a tag inside the fish that spits out a sound, and that sound can be heard by microphones. So we put microphones, also called receivers, throughout the river. We put out about 33 of them. They're all these little dots throughout here. These are little listening stations or receivers, and they're listening for the fish that we put these sound making tags in. Each tag is an individual and it has a unique code so we can track individual fish and how they move throughout the river. So we're hoping to answer questions of like, what's important in the winter? What's important during spawning season? Where do fish go when sewage overflow happens? Or what happens when you dye the river green? So this is an image that I made of a bunch of different common carp, again, that really tolerant species, swimming around, just to show that we are able to like actually track hour by hour where these fish are in the river. This is a 7 of them kind of moving around. The top left, you can see like days really slowly ticking off. I'm working on making these graphs better, but this is a whole learning curve for me on how to make just a GIF in general, but then have it make sense. But at least they move, so that's fun. So yeah, if you go to the next one, I believe we have some outputs of this. We tagged or equipped 80 fish last June. And what happened July 2nd? 8 to 10 inches of rain fell on your community and some of your basements flooded, and to alleviate that, they pumped sewage into Bubbly Creek. We had 12 fish that were living in Bubbly Creek at this time. So all these dots count up the number of individual fish that I have equipped with transmitters that were within Bubbly Creek. And then sewage overflow happened on July 2nd through the 6th, and then again on the 12th and again on the 15th. But right away, we could see the number of fish in Bubbly Creek just, they left and went somewhere else. It took them about 10 to 12 days to start peeking their heads back in. And if I look at water quality, those are days where algae has started to grow and allow the oxygen levels to rise to a point where fish can breathe again. But then they're at night when algae is not producing oxygen anymore, the oxygen level in the water falls back down and those fish leave. And so we see like up, down, over these number of days. And then really the highest we kind of sustain is 1 or 2 fish have returned to Bubbly Creek, even by November. We're going out now, downloading more data, downloading the data from each of those listening receivers to see over the winter have conditions improved to where these fish have returned back to where they were before this event happened. Are they coming back in because now it's spring and they can go spawn in that backwater or what? So yeah, go to the next one. So that's some of the stuff that I've been kind of playing with or working on and telling stories. This is some of the stuff we're going to hopefully answer this year. I have this fancy piece of equipment that I can toss off the back of my kayak and kayak around Bubbly Creek or the South Branch or really anywhere. And it'll tick off water quality variables for me as I kayak around. And then I can kind of interpolate a map of what water quality looks like. This map here is dissolved oxygen within Bubbly Creek. What we want are colors that are green and blue, and we don't want reds. So of course there's red over here where they pump in the sewage. I think it's probably always red over near the sewage plant. But I'm interested to see, is this always kind of this orangish color, or was it just the day I was out? So we're gonna be going out throughout the summer this year and tracking this and kind of making a map. I kind of want to know when is the oxygen good for fish and when is it bad, and are there any geographic patterns to it? This is just one day, so don't take a whole lot of interpretation from it. It also ticks off algae, so I can monitor where are algae blooms and are they good or bad algae. There's things called harmful algal blooms. This is just track good algae and where is it high and where is it low. And so I'm interested to see, is there always kind of an algae bloom in this part, and is there always no algae up here, and how do the barge slips respond? And then you utilize all this to look at that fish data again and pull it in. So do the fish, when they come in here, do they tend to hang out in this area that has high oxygen, or do they not get past this area that has low oxygen once they've left? Those sort of questions. And so we're trying to pull all this together and layer it on top of then being able to answer what's the potency of these restoration projects. As we add in more islands, or as we remove debris from barge slips, or maybe do riparian plantings, which means putting plants along the shores here that can grow out of the water. Do fish start to come back? Do they utilize those spaces more? And these are some of the tools I'm using to look at those things. I think if you go to the next, we kind of want to just talk and see how do you guys use the river? What do you want out of the river? What are things that we could do to help bridge that? Yeah.
I'd like to be able to swim in it.
Are you gonna do the downtown swim?
Can anybody do it?
Requirements,
They do.
previous swimming in some event or whatever.
Yeah,
Swimming in a lake.
I was like, I can keep my head above, but I would like to also swim in it.
Question about the graph you just showed, and I realize this is one day, but
Yeah.
it looks like your best water quality is right around Bridgeport Art Center. And I'm wondering if you can think of any reason why that would be.
Not until I do it more.
Okay, fair enough.
What is happening is that this was during midday, and this is also a spot that was extremely, like the water was green. So not only is this graph green, but the water itself was green, so this might just be high because that was the highest area of algae producing oxygen. But some of the questions I have, is that pretty static, like does algae really hang out there? And the opposite, is there always sort of a weird lull in oxygen near that pitney old plant?
Over, just a scientific question, can you overlay this with a bit of the map?
I will, why?
I'm remembering that
It's kind of
there
deep.
are some shallow and deep spots, so
Yeah.
like it varies. Not all a canal right there, so
You don't have
that
to.
might influence some of your algae,
Yeah,
putting it up there.
well, we're hoping to use the fish finder equipment. So you can use this equipment that allows anglers to go find fish, but we can use it to look and see like, oh, is there a down tree here or a shopping cart there? Or we found a car last year. This also tracks how deep the water is, and so we can actually make a map of how deep it is in different spots and where different trees are or where vegetation is. And so, yeah, that'll be like the third map on this.
Be aware of like the gelatinous structure of the substrate, the fit record. Yes, you might be getting involved.
Yeah, super deep.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of current, other than when there's a sewage event, like, is there always something coming out of that pumping plant?
There shouldn't be, but that's what that seems to suggest, right?
Yeah.
It should be very stagnant. Unless they're pumping into it.
The only time you should see it is.
Yeah.
Very non-scientific questions, but, is there a model of like an urban river that people sort of aspire to, what's like ideally where we might be in 10 or 15 years? If we do everything right and we invest a lot and people are, really involved, is there sort of some model of what we can hope for or dream of? And then my other question is, like, it's easy to imagine that the worst part of Bubbly Creek where the sewage is, if that sewage wasn't there, that could probably be like the best part of the river because it's really isolated from the boat traffic. Is there any, I don't know, has there ever been any discussion of like shutting down the overflow into Bubbly Creek there so that it could become some sort of great, natural place?
Sam seems to know.
I can really answer that. I'll put the model view, but I'll talk about the shutting down the raising that new thing. So, I used to work for MWD back in the day, now I work for Bar. I am not speaking on any behalf, I'm not, but my knowledge is that, MWD has this goal of reducing the amount of combined sewage overflow events from the Racing Avenue pumping station through their reservoir system. The McCoke Reservoir is only, I think, half online. I think we still have another section to come online. The number of events has greatly reduced since that first half has come online because we're able to store that combined sewage and rainwater to then be processed later. And then when the next half comes online, they're only anticipating, I think, basically 0 to 3, less than 5 events a year. I think we're already at 5 or less a year right now, which is great. It used to be close to 10 to 15 or so. So they're working on it to reduce that.
Apparently one event can scare fish away for 6 months.
Yeah. That can happen. So they are working towards that, and then MWD and the Army Corps of Engineers, they also put together a plan, and Shed and everybody else, they contributed towards this a planning study for the Chicago River, and one of the planning reports is basically restoring Bubbly Creek so that it doesn't have that cap that substrate and can put in restoration. That is a long-term goal. EPA's got to be involved. Everyone else has got to be involved. It's a whole process, but it's impossible to shut Racing Avenue Station down, but they are able to greatly reduce the number of events due to the reservoir. The goal is to get it to 0. They still have to have it, because if we don't have that, then, combined sewage will then back up in basement. And we don't.
And the region the pumping station serves is massive.
It's
It's
huge. Downtown all the way to like
yeah.
79th or somewhere right down there. It's huge.
Yeah, they use that to bring the sewage up to a level that it can then go to, the city, like, so that pumping station will always be there and active, just the goal by 2030, when the CARB program is fully online, is that they'll never use the pumps that go to pumping. So then, if that proves true, it would be really nice to then do all that restoration work. Now, when we swim, yeah, then, I don't, yeah, maybe you could swim. As far as like aspirations, it depends on what your goal is. So I think of in France, the river Seine, people swim in it. They have walled off sections of it, and you can swim in it almost any time of the year. They're having the Olympics in the river, so those are cool. The Thames in London, they brought back eel migrations that never used to go up there. And then across our western side, they brought back a lot of salmon migrations and kind of stuff using it. So it kind of depends on what your goal really is. What do we aspire for? Well, we generally fall under fishable, swimmable. I like to go back to just the Clean Water Act, so we should be able to do these things. So how do we, at least at the first part, look to make an area more fishable? How do we study the sport fish, what they like, how do we make them not just present so you can catch them, but healthy and happy? Mostly because as an aquarium, we like to lead with animals first. But along that line, that gets people start thinking about, okay, well, why not? Why can't we swim in it too? Right? Yeah.
My vision's not that good, but I couldn't read the fish names. Can you
Yeah.
read them out for me?
All of them, or are you interested in a certain question?
It's a lot of fish.
They're invasive. Which ones are?
And there, so alewife is the species that invaded the Great Lakes and is a planktivore that swims throughout the Great Lakes. We shouldn't be finding it in the river, but it makes its way in. Somehow they find it sometimes in the South Branch. Banded killifish once was listed as endangered, now it's coming back. Black bullhead is a catfish. Black crappie is a cool sport fish that I'd like to see a lot more of. Top minnow is a really small guy that swims at the top of the water column. Bluegill is a sport fish. They really like substrate to spawn on, so seeing more of them tells us a bit about the substrate in that area. Blunt-nosed minnow, native but super tolerant. People actually use them to test if effluent is safe or not, or different pollutants. So we see them kind of throughout. Brook silverside, super intolerant, so kind of cool to see them there. The next one was common carp. What would come after it? A C. Common carp channel catfish? No. What would I have seen next? Emerald shiner, intolerant, fathead minnow, tolerant. Gizzard shad, I don't know what they tell you about water quality, but they are ferocious eaters of zooplankton, which feed on algae. So seeing them, I like to say seeing large populations of gizzard shad tells us a lot about how the food web is operating in the ecosystem. What do we have? Golden shiner lives throughout the whole Midwest, kind of just present goldfish, super tolerant. Green sunfish, similar to bluegill, where they're native to the area, but tell us about substrates. Largemouth bass are sport fish that are a predator, so seeing them around tells us the food web is able to feed them. Mimic shiner, I have no clue why they're here, but we find a ton of them and it's super cool. And so I'm hoping to study that more with some geneticist people, and how they're related to other parts of the Mississippi River where we do find them. Another sunfish, so the same thing as the green sunfish and bluegill, tell us about substrate. Pumpkin seed, same thing. Round goby came in from the Great Lakes. They're tolerant of a ton of conditions, so they don't tell me a whole lot. Spotfin shiner are a minnow species, so they feed a bunch of stuff. Same thing like spot tail. So they're kind of native to the area. Unidentified, I'm still working to figure out all these. They all look the same and they're about the size of a fingernail.
Is the identification usually through genetics?
I usually use genetics to confirm all these because they all just look so similar. A warmouth is another kind of predator slash sunfish, and then white sucker are a neat migratory species that are pretty tolerant to condition, but just kind of need to talk about and have. So those are a lot of them. We found 25 species throughout the large fish program. I think this represents 23.
Where were the South Branch, where were the sample locations you were testing?
I'll leave this map here. So we sampled in the back of Bubbly Creek, we sampled at Park 571 at, I call this, what did I call it? I don't know, the Damon Avenue boat slip thing, right outside.
That's the Santa Fe slip that
Santa Fe slip?
is the one right next to the Damon's House, just east of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard a name for it. Okay, I'll change it. Right. Richard Daly Boat Dock and Lawrence Fish and Shrimp. Here.
No, so not in the bark slips on the north side.
I can't get foot access.
Oh.
So my sites were all, I would like drive up and pop out, put in these things, and then go on to the next site. And then the North Branch sites were spread from the Wild Mile all the way up. So much broader breadth of sites, but way less diversity, which is interesting. Yeah.
Have you been able to find anything in the literature about this like tolerant, intolerant, north, south, like divide, or the evidence that you have that shows that there's, you know, more and less tolerant fish on the south branch side of the river? Like, is there anything that backs that up from like other studies?
Not really. So like I could look through MWRD's data, but they don't have sites that are close to really where I was sampling. And I guess I haven't looked through the SIMS data too much to really parse that apart. What's interesting though is that a lot of the surveys for adults use techniques that aren't great at finding some of the tiny species that I'm finding in the larval fish survey. So that's what's nice about using different surveys too. There could be a diversity of adult fish up in the North Branch, but they're not spawning to the point where I find surviving babies. So that when I pull it together into a paper, that will be a problem. Understand.
Are you looking at animals in the river besides fish?
Yeah, I was gonna add that. So I mean, you know, my team, we partner with Austin on a lot. We're much more public facing and do a lot of programming. And I wanted to tease, maybe if you don't mind going to one of the last slides. So Urban Rivers last year started piloting Monday free kayaks out of Park 571. Did anyone go
It
paddle?
was so popular, you
Yeah.
couldn't get one.
Okay, well, there'll be more
And
this
it
year.
took about
Yeah.
2 weeks to catch on and then everybody was out. It was great.
On Monday evenings, when they're out there paddling, we're gonna be there every Monday with a different community science project. So we'll do monitoring of butterflies, birds, turtles, litter, water quality. We'll do different things each week. So if you do come out on a Monday, even if maybe you don't go paddle, or if you have people who don't wanna paddle, maybe you could come do some community science with us. And then the park district also, I think, was overseeing a couple of real small studies as well, looking at butterflies and birds. So between all of these different folks, we want to kind of pull things together over, maybe even starting this year. I'm kind of picturing like science fair style, like everyone being able to share what they're seeing and how we can look at this whole picture of, you all probably see wildlife around this place all the time. I mean, I've seen eagles, herons, turtles right around this part of the river. So if we document it more and kind of see where they are and what they're using, and we can improve those parts of the habitat, that'll be helpful. So it's cool that Austin's doing this deep dive into what you can't see underwater, and then we're using more of the community engagement to try to track what else is a little bit easier to see above water. So yeah, I was gonna tease opportunities to kayak on the river and join citizen science projects. And I also just have like a sign up sheet, just like as a follow up to this. I won't like sign you up for any emails or anything unless you want more information about other shed stuff. But if you just want to give me your contact info as we're wrapping up today, I'll follow up and just share some more information. And in addition to Urban Rivers paddles, we are also, and so Urban Rivers has a small fleet of kayaks. They were operating out of 571 last year. We're going to partner with Water Riders to also do free community paddles out of Bridgeport Art Center on Thursday afternoons or evenings. So hopefully we can get you all out to join us. It'll be kind of like a loosely facilitated paddle with folks from Shed, so we can kind of point out wildlife or talk about some of the restoration projects or kind of dialogue with you about conservation on the river. So it'll just be another opportunity, and we're aiming to do that for people within certain zip codes in this region. So hopefully we'll get to see a lot of you out. So that's the kind of thing I'll be sure to email. If you want to get my contact or share your contact info. You can also email my team, which includes me, anytime at conservationaction@shedaquarium.org. If you have anything you want to chat about.
We've got time for like one or two more. Anybody?
I've been writing down all the questions too, but.
Can I ask about the South Branch? I was like, not on July 2nd, luckily, or around those July days.
We were later. Later.
I ran into a woman and her child kayaking like the day Sewage was released, and I was like,
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, we're hoping to, sorry to cut you off, but we're hoping to work with the Park District and others to try to get some better real-time data. You know, they test the beaches every day.
Yes.
And then they have like the flag system
Yep.
to alert folks to not hang out at the beach. And the river doesn't have that kind of like clear, transparent, like
Like
data.
the day after a big rain, red flag,
Right.
don't.
So I think there are some systems in place, whether through the Park District or through Current, if anyone's ever heard of Current, but I think we kind of need to like have some more data sharing, and I think that'll help people be informed about when it's safe to get out and like really interact with the river.
I was gonna just talk about the Bubbly Creek, about all the trees that are hanging over, and is that creating that great, habitat for birds? I don't know if it affects the fish habitat or the spawning. I was just wondering, like, are you looking at that at all? Like, just the way Bubbly Creek has a lot of the turned over trees touching the water, which seem to be really great habitat.
yeah, I tend to say fish like to play hide and seek, so anytime we can give them something to do that in, it's helpful. But what I like about it being trees is that they decompose, and that kind of makes like a whole food web. A lot of times people try to put in something more permanent, that is maybe like a big plastic thing that fish can like hide and stuff in, but that doesn't function the same way as a downed tree does. So I think of that, but then also just the overhanging vegetation, all those leaves will fall into that, also then decomposes and fuels a healthy food web versus sewage.
And it'd be cool to see more diversity of trees and plants on the shoreline. Sometimes the only ones that are there are just whatever's hardiest. And so just as, you know, it's nice to have the natural shoreline, and hopefully we can keep adding more variety to the shorelines too. So it's something we'll consider. And if any of you are homeowners or, you know, yeah, like that's something to just think about, is how we diversify. Sometimes it is a lot of the more like hardy, sometimes even non-native species that hang out on the river edge. I don't know for sure in Bubbly Creek too.
I haven't,
On the Wild Mile, I know that's something they've been looking at.
I know maples, oak, and so like I can't like see all of it.
Thanks for all the good questions, and thanks for, you know, hearing us out with some of the things that we're working on. Would love to see a lot of you out at some of the upcoming events this summer, both ours and yours, and other things that are being hosted. And thank you for the opportunity to come join you guys. This is great.
Thank you for coming.
And I'll leave my sign up on the table as things wrap if you wanna sign up.
Yeah, there's one, before we wrap, just 1 second, I do want to remind you of some upcoming events. So some things that you might find interesting this Friday. The Maritime Museum in Bridgeport Art Center is hosting a lecture by someone who has actually been to the wreck of the Titanic. So that sounds like it's worth $5. If you're interested in that, and if you've never been to Third Fridays at the Bridgeport Art Center, it's also really cool. They open all the artist studios and local people can tell you about their work. So that's a fun event that's this Friday night. The lecture's at 7. I believe the event at the Art Center starts a little earlier than that. Our meet and greet for people who are interested in joining our board is going to be May 1st at 6:30 at Mars. Just bring yourself. And let's talk. We're here to answer all your questions. We really do need to bring in some new volunteers and some new blood. The one that I forgot that was mentioned here is Chicago River Day, which is May May, do you remember?
17th,
Yeah, it's a Saturday in May, hosted by Friends of the Chicago River, and they want to get people out to clean up trash and to see all of the river. It's a good paddling opportunity as
May
well. 11th, thank you. You can sign up on their website if you're interested in that. The Backward River Festival at Canal Port River Walk is going to be sponsored by UIC Freshwater Lab on June 8th. We're getting more and more details about that. But this is going to be like a learning event about things that are happening around the Damon silos, including the lot itself, but also the river and wildlife and such around that area. And then our South Branch connectivity plan, all the work that you have helped us with on the riverfront. We are going to be releasing that in June, and we plan on having some kind of event when we get that far, and we will let you know. So thanks, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Please feel free to ask a few more questions on the way out, but do be kind to library staff. They want to go home and they close at 8.